Today's story is Kamala and the Seven Thieves. It's a very old story. Once upon a time, in a Punjabi village very far from here, there was a woman and her husband. Now, her husband was a barber. That means he cuts hair. And he was good at what he did, but he was a little lazy. And rather than cut hair, a lot of times he would just take tea in the tea shop with his friends and sit outside and gossip about goings-ons in the village. Well, that went on for a while, and he didn't make very much money doing that, and soon they didn't have enough money to buy food. Well, his wife, Kamala, was a very industrious and capable person, and she said to her husband, "I hear the Raja is getting married. He's going to have a great wedding feast." Now, everyone knows when the Raja has a great wedding feast, anyone can come before him and ask for something, and the Raja has to give him something. So go and ask him for something. I'll clean my pots and pans, and I'll be ready to cook. Well, the barber couldn't really argue with his wife, so he went off to the palace, and he got admitted to the great wedding feast, and there was... Wow, it was a lot. He took it all in. It was magnificent. There were silks hanging on the walls. There were magnificent rugs. There were people dressed in fancy clothes. He felt really tiny. He got in line to make his request, and then he came before the Raja, and the Raja was impatient. "Go on, tell me, what do you want? Next." And the barber was, he didn't know what to say. He said, "Please give me something." "What?" said the Raja. "Something," said the barber. "Well," said the Raja, "give him a piece of wasteland near his home." "Next." Phew, well, that was something for the barber to go before the Raja, but he went home thinking he did pretty good. He got to speak to the Raja and he got something. Well, he came in the door and his wife, Kamala, went up to him and said, "So, did you get something? I'm ready to cook." And he said, he puffed his chest up, "We were given a piece of wasteland near our home." And his wife, Kamala, said, "Wasteland? I can't cook that. That won't feed our bellies." And with a piece of wasteland, we'd have to find oxen and a plow, and we'd have to dig up the soil, and we'd have to get seeds. We don't have money for any of that. "Hey," said the barber, "I did what you asked me to do. I got us a piece of wasteland. You figure out the next part." Well, Kamala did think. She thought for a couple days, and she had an idea. And she woke up one morning and she said to her husband, "Come with me. We'll see what we can do about this wasteland." And they walked until they came to the land. And she found some big sticks and she gave one to her husband and she said, "Look, take the sticks. We'll walk around and poke in the ground." He said, "Why?" She said, "You'll see. Walk around and poke in the ground. If anybody comes and sees us, we stop instantly." Okay? So they did that. They went around with their sticks and poked them in the ground at different sections of this plot of land. And when anybody came near, they stopped and talked to each other and pretended that nothing was happening. Well, in a little while, later that afternoon, a couple of thieves were walking past. And they saw Kamala and her husband poking in the ground, and then they stopped when they saw him, and they watched for a little bit, and one of the thieves went over and said to Kamala and her husband, "What are you doing?" And Kamala said, "We're not doing anything." He said, "No, I saw you poking sticks in the ground." She said, "No, we're not doing anything." He said, "Please, you can tell me if it's a secret." And she said, "Oh," she's pretending, "Yes, this is a family secret. And I was just told it, and you must promise you'll tell no one." And the thief, who has honor, thief's honor, if that matters for anything, says, "Of course, I won't tell anyone." So she says to him, "I was just told that this, our land, has 5 pots of gold buried in it. So we're sticking in our sticks to find the pots. Where the pots are, tomorrow we'll come dig it out. But we're trying not to let anyone know. You keep it a secret?" And he said, "Of course, of course." And he stayed with them and watched them, and finally they got tired, Kamala and her husband, and they walked off home. The thief, his eyes were gleaming. Oh, this was excitement for him. So he went and found his other fellow thieves, There were 7 altogether, his pal and 5 more, and he told them that in this plot of land was 5 pots of gold. Well, that night they all stole shovels from different farms and came over and they dug up that field. They worked all night until finally, of course they didn't find a thing except rocks, until finally they were covered in sweat and their fingers all had blisters on them all along here, right along here. They had blisters from shoveling so hard all night. And they went home and went to wherever thieves live and went to bed. Well, Kamala and her husband came over the next day, and what did they see? They saw this magnificently plowed field. It looked like oxen and a plow had just gone through it and gotten it all ready for planting. And her husband looked at Kamala and said, "Wow, this is amazing." And she said, "Oh, we're not done yet." She went to the local grain dealer and asked him to lend her 5 pounds of rice. She was going to plant the rice, and she promised to pay him back double at the end of the harvest. This is how grain dealers work. So he said, "Of course, and if you don't pay me back double, I'll take your house." And she said, "Won't happen." So she went and her husband, and they planted the whole field in rice. They took care of it all spring and summer, weeded, make sure it got water, took care of everything. And in the fall, they had a magnificent harvest of rice, gigantic harvest, bushels and bushels. She paid back the grain dealer easily, and she kept back what she needed for her cooking, and she sold the rest, and she ended up having a big pot of gold herself, a big earthenware crock of gold that she took home. Now, the thieves who lived in the surrounding area found out that she had done this and that she had all that gold. And the head of the thieves knocked on the door one day and said to her, "You give us some of that gold." And she said, "Why? It's mine. I'm not giving you any of that gold." He said, "No, we dug up that whole field for you, and you planted and you got gold. You said there was gold in that field." Well, she said, "Yes, I told you there was gold in that field, but I know how to find gold in a field. You have to plant it. You have to weed it. You have to take care of it all summer. It's not just digging it once. It's work. And then you have to harvest it and dry the grains. And then you get the gold. So this is mine. You don't get any of it. You can't have any." Well, that set off the thief. He thought he had done one night of digging. He and his friends deserved some gold. So they knew she had a pot of gold somewhere, and they started hanging around her house, and she was aware of that. And they would hang outside the window at night. And one night, when she and her husband were just about to go to sleep, her husband said to her, "Honey, Kamala, where'd you put that pot of gold? I don't think we should leave it in the house. I think those thieves will come in and steal it." And she knew there was probably a thief outside, so she said in a loud voice, "Oh, it's not in the house. I hung it in a cloth, and it's hanging up in the neem tree outside. Nobody will find it." And she and her husband went to sleep. Well, the thief went and told his 6 other thieves. They came over. The head of the thieves, they looked up in the tree, and what did they see? Well, it was a moonlit night, and they saw something hanging in the tree. It was whitish and silverish, and it gleamed as if it had gold inside. They assumed that was the sheet that was holding the pot of gold. What they didn't know, but that Kamala knew, was it was actually a nest of hornets. And in that moonlit night, with the dim light, it looked like a sheet holding a pot of gold. So the head of the thieves said to one of them, "Okay, you go ahead, climb up there, and see if you can bring that pot down." And so one of the thieves climbed up. Of course, as soon as he got close to the nest, a hornet came out and stung him. Ow! And when he did that, the other thieves went, "Wait, he's taking money and putting it in his pocket." And then the thief again went, "Ow!" and hit his pocket where he'd just been stung. And again, another thief said, "I'm going up there. He's stealing the money." So another thief went up there, and of course, when he got up there, another hornet came out and stung him. Ow! Ow! So the thieves down below were thinking, "They're stealing the money. They're putting it in their pockets. That's not fair." So each thief comes up, one after another, to stop them. And of course, they start getting stung. And finally, the head of the thieves, the captain of the thieves, gets fed up. He's been watching them, and they're all stealing money as far as he can tell. He's yelling up at them. They're not listening. So he climbs up. He gets out on that branch, and of course, he starts getting stung. And he doesn't understand what's going on. And then the next minute, his weight on the branch with the 6 other thieves, the whole branch crashes to the ground with a hornet's nest on it. And the hornet's nest crashes on the ground, and all those hornets are released and start stinging them like crazy. Not only had they fallen high from a tree onto the ground, so some of them maybe broke their legs or hurt their ankles or hurt their arm or hurt their wrist, but they were filled with it. They had to run as fast as they could to get away from those hornets who were chasing them. They got away, and they went off to wherever they went to nurse their wounds. It took them a long time to get better. Now, Kamala and her husband, she assumed that they were gone for good, so she stopped worrying about them. But time passed, and it was summertime, and one very hot night, and this happens in the Punjab, one very hot night, it was too hot to sleep indoors, Kamala and her husband moved their beds outside and went to sleep outside. Wouldn't that be fun to do sometime? I know you've been in a tent before, but to just sleep under the stars in a bed without any covering, it was that hot. Anyhow, she and her husband went to sleep. What she didn't know is that the thieves had been watching the house again, and they were angry. They were so angry at her, they didn't care about the gold anymore. They were going to steal her. So while Kamala was sleeping, they very quietly, and thieves are good at this, picked up her bed, and each of them took a corner post, and they carried her away, and they started trotting down the road. Her husband didn't hear a thing. He was asleep in the other cot, snoring like crazy. Well, they start trotting down the road, and they're moving and moving, and at some point, Kamala wakes up and looks around, and what does she see? Her bed is moving, and it's being held. She looks over, she sees the thieves are all carrying her, and they're all running and taking turns carrying the cot, and she hears them talking. We're going to take her, and we're going to sell her as a servant to some other house. We'll make some money that way, and she'll never see her home again. For a second, she thought everything was lost. But Kamala isn't that type. She's resourceful, and she immediately figures out, I'm going to get out of this one way or another. So she pretends she's asleep. She keeps her cover up to her throat, and she pretends she's asleep. And at some point, all 4 of the thieves put the bed down, and they say, we got to stop. She's too heavy. We're tired carrying her. And they stop under a tree. And while they're talking, she immediately sneaks out of the bed, leaves the covers there, and climbs up into the tree. So it looks like she's still asleep in there. And the thieves are all talking, and the captain of the thieves says, yeah, we can stay here and rest a while. There's no rush. We're far enough away from her village. We'll get to where we're going to sell her tomorrow. And so all the thieves spread out, and some of them begin to fall asleep. And the captain says, wait, somebody has to take guard. What if she wakes up and runs away? And they all argue about it, and finally the captain says, all right, I'll take the first watch. I'll take the guard. Make sure she doesn't run away. The rest of you go to sleep. So everybody else fell asleep. The captain of the guard, he started twirling his mustaches. He thought he was quite a handsome young man, and singing songs to himself. And Kamala wasn't quite sure what she was going to do. She's perched up in the tree. And then she realizes maybe she can fool him a little. So she was wearing a camise and something over the camise, so she takes the apron of her camise and covers her head with it. And she starts singing softly. Well, the captain of the thieves looks up, and what does he see? He sees a ghost-like young woman up in the tree singing, and he says to himself, I've heard of this kind of thing happening. It's a moonlit night. I bet that's a fairy in the tree. And fairies like young men. So he twirled her mustaches. He smoothed down his hair. He made sure he looked good. And then he looked up at what he thought was the fairy, and he said, Fairy, come down. I'd like to spend some time with you. And she just kept singing. And he climbed up a little into the tree. He said, Fairy, Fairy, why don't you talk to me? And Kamala said in a very soft voice, Oh, because you're a human, and you'll leave me. All humans leave me. And he went, I would never do that. And he climbed up and he said, Look at me. I would never do that. And she immediately plucked a pomegranate and stuffed it in his mouth and shoved him. And when she did that, he fell out of the tree, landed on the ground, all sprawled with a pomegranate in his mouth. That woke everybody up, and all the thieves said, What's the matter? What's going on? And all he could do was mumble, go, because he had the pomegranate stuffed in his mouth. And then all the other thieves go, He's bewitched. He's bewitched. And then they look up and they see they see this ghostly figure all covered in white with a white covering over her face who starts going, The thieves were terrified. They grabbed the captain and they ran as fast as they could. They thought they were being haunted by some fairy or some witch who had bewitched their captain, and they ran as fast as they could. They ran beyond the next village, to the village beyond that, even beyond, to another state. Well, Kamala waited for a while. They didn't show up, so she climbed down. Somehow she managed to put her bed on her head. Women in those days could carry all kinds of things on their heads, and she trudged back very slowly to her house. When her husband saw her, he said, What's going on? And she said, Don't worry, I think we've seen the end of the thieves. We'll never see them again. And after that, the thieves never came back. They were terrified. And Kamala still practiced her practice of getting gold from the earth. That is, she planted rice every year, and every year she harvested more rice. And that's the story of Kamala and the 7 thieves.